The grinder roared, filling Harlem Brew's cafe with the scent of roasted beans as Amara Johnson balanced a tray of steaming mugs. The shop buzzed with the morning rush, its mismatched tables cluttered with laptops and chatter. Amara's apron bore stains from endless shifts, her natural curl slipping loose from a bun. Her stepmother's words echoed in her mind, "You'll never be enough." But she pushed them aside, focusing on the clink of coins in her tip jar. This job was her lifeline, her slow climb out of a house where cruelty suffocated her. A sharp male voice cut through the noise. "This latte is cold. Can't you do anything right?" A man in a tailored suit glared from table 6, phone pressed to his ear. Amara's jaw tightened, but she kept her voice calm. "I'll fix that right away, sir." As she turned, her eyes caught a stranger in the corner. He wore a simple black sweater and dark jeans, but his broad shoulders and steady posture made him stand out. His deep brown eyes followed her, not with judgment but with a quiet intensity. She remade the latte, hands steady despite the man's muttering. When she set the cup down, he scoffed. "About time." Amara's temper sparked, but her smile stayed tight. "Sir, it's been 2 minutes. If you're still unhappy, I can call my manager." Her tone was polite, her eyes flashing fire. The man grumbled and backed off, and she felt a small triumph. As she cleared another table, she sensed the stranger's gaze again, a weight she couldn't shake. When the rush faded, Amara leaned on the counter, her mind drifting to her stepmother's latest ultimatum: pay rent or get out. At 24, she'd endured years of contempt and taunts. The cafe was her sanctuary, even with its grueling hours. She glanced at the tip jar, mentally counting how long until she could afford her own place. "Excuse me?" The deep voice pulled her back. The stranger stood at the counter, tall and commanding even in casual clothes. Up close, his presence struck harder. Smooth skin, strong jaw, and those eyes that seemed to see through her. "That was impressive," he said, nodding toward table 6. Not many people would have held their ground like that. Amara brushed a curl behind her ear. "You get used to it working here." "I'm Malik Carter," he said, his voice low, almost intimate. "And you are?" "Amara." She busied herself wiping the counter, avoiding his gaze, though her pulse quickened. "Amara," he repeated, as if savoring it. "You've got strength. People like that don't come around often. You ever dream about more than this place?" She gave a tired laugh. "Every day. But dreams don't pay the bills." For a moment the cafe's noise faded. The hiss of the espresso machine, the clatter of cups, it all blurred under his steady gaze. Then he slid a card across the counter. His name and number, nothing more. "If you ever want to talk about something bigger, call me." He dropped a 20 for a $3 coffee. "Keep the change." Amara watched him leave, the card heavy in her pocket. Later on her break, curiosity got the better of her. She searched his name on her phone and froze. Malik Carter was the Malik Carter, the billionaire CEO of Carter Global, a real estate empire stretching across states. Articles called him brilliant, ruthless, a man who'd built his fortune from nothing. But whispers hinted at pressure, rivals circling, family battles. That night in her small bedroom, Amara held the card. Her stepmother's voice seeped through the walls, dripping with venom. She traced the number with her thumb, her heart racing. Why her? Why a waitress in a neighborhood cafe? He'd seen something in her defiance, in the way she stood tall. But what did he want? The next day he returned. Same corner table, same piercing gaze. Her hands trembled as she poured his coffee. "You're back," she said, half teasing, half wary. "Couldn't stay away." His smile was faint but warm. "This place has something special." His eyes locked onto hers, and again she felt it. The spark. The pull she didn't understand. Amara didn't call him that night or the next, but Malik kept returning to the cafe. Each time he sat at the same corner table. Each time his gaze found hers the moment she walked by. Their conversations grew longer with every visit. At first it was small talk about the weather or the cafe's best blend, but soon he asked about her favorite books, her dreams, the little things that made her laugh. He always left a generous tip, sometimes ridiculous for the price of a single coffee, and though she tried to tell herself not to notice, she couldn't help but wonder why a man like him kept showing up. The bell chimed one evening, the cafe quieter than usual, and Malik walked in not in his casual sweater but in a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. His confidence filled the space as he bypassed his usual table and walked straight to the counter. Amara straightened instinctively, her pulse quickening. "Evening," he said softly, his tone carrying the same intimacy that unsettled her from the start. "Busy night?" She shook her head. "Not tonight, just the regulars and their decaf." Her voice wavered, and she tucked a curl behind her ear to hide her nerves. Malik's eyes lingered, not on her hands or her apron, but directly on hers, steady and searching. He leaned on the counter, lowering his voice. "I've been thinking about you." The words struck her like a spark. Heat rushed to her face, and she busied herself wiping a spotless section of the counter. "Me? I'm just the girl who pours your coffee." He shook his head slowly, his gaze unwavering. "You're more than that. I saw it the first day. The way you stood up to that man. You've got fire, Amara. The kind of strength most people don't." Her breath caught, her rag slipping from her hand. She swallowed hard. "Why me? You could talk to anyone. Someone with status. Someone who belongs in your world." "Because you're real," Malik said, his voice even, but edged with something deeper. "I need someone who doesn't buckle under pressure. Someone who can stand beside me when it matters." His fingers tapped the counter, the rhythm matching her racing heart. "I need someone like you." Her throat tightened. "Need me for what?" Malik glanced around the cafe, making sure the few patrons were lost in their own worlds. Then he leaned closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "I have a proposition. It's not conventional, but hear me out. I need a wife for 1 year and an heir. It's about my inheritance, about family pressure and business rivals. A marriage and a child secure everything. After that, you're free with more than enough money to start over anywhere, any way you want." Amara froze. The air between them grew heavy as the words sank in. Marry him? A billionaire she barely knew? The idea sounded absurd, yet the promise of freedom clashed violently with her fear. "You're serious?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Why me? Why not someone in your world?" "Because you don't pretend," Malik said softly. "You fight back. You're strong. I don't want someone polished by money and power. I want someone who knows how to stand their ground. This wouldn't just be a contract, Amara. You'd be my partner." Her chest tightened. "So I'd be your wife. Your hired wife. Your incubator." Her voice sharpened, her stepmother's cruelty fueling her anger. Malik's jaw tightened, but his eyes stayed gentle. "It's a deal, yes, but I'd respect you. You'd have your own life, your own space, and when it's over, you'd walk away free. Real freedom. No one controlling you, no one holding you down." The word freedom echoed in her chest like a drumbeat. She thought of her stepmother's house, the endless belittling, the suffocating weight of being told she'd never be enough. This offer was a door out, a chance to start over. But the cost was her heart and her future, tied to a man she barely knew. "I don't know," she whispered, her voice trembling. "This is a lot. I'm not some pawn, Malik. I've spent my whole life fighting to be more than that." "And you are," he said firmly, his voice low and earnest. "That's why I'm asking you. I'm not asking for love, Amara. I'm asking for a partnership. 1 year, clear terms, and then you leave with everything you need to build your life." The cafe around her faded into silence, leaving only his voice and the weight of her decision, her stepmother's insults, the tip jar that never filled fast enough, the endless grind of survival. All collided with the steady fire in his eyes, the kind of gaze that saw her not as a waitress but as something more. "I need time," she whispered at last, her throat tight. "I can't just say yes." Malik nodded, sliding another card across the counter even though she still had the first. "Take all the time you need. Just think about what you want, Amara, not what they've told you you're worth." He straightened and walked out, the bell above the door chiming as he left. The card burned in her pocket like a key to a future she couldn't imagine. That night in her cramped bedroom, her stepmother's voice seeping through the walls, Amara traced the numbers again, her heart racing. Freedom dangled in front of her, terrifying and tempting. By dawn, her decision crystallized. She would call him, not for him, but for herself. Amara called him that morning, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Within days, everything in her life shifted. Malik's team moved swiftly, lawyers, contracts, and arrangements stacking up faster than she could process. What once felt like a far-off fantasy was suddenly her reality. She stood in a silk gown worth more than her yearly wages, staring into a mirror at a version of herself she barely recognized. Her natural curls were swept into an elegant updo, her brown skin glowing under careful makeup, but her eyes betrayed unease. This was her escape from her stepmother's cage. Yet it felt like she had stepped into another prison, one wrapped in gold and expectation. The door opened and Malik appeared, dressed in a tailored tuxedo that framed his broad shoulders and sharp features. His deep brown eyes softened when they met hers, a flicker of warmth breaking through the cold terms of the contract. "You look breathtaking," he said, his voice low, almost reverent. The sincerity stirred something in her chest, but she pressed it down, reminding herself this was business. 1 year, an heir, $5 million, then freedom. "Thanks," she murmured, smoothing the gown's fabric with restless fingers. "This all feels like a dream. Not the good kind." The words slipped out before she could stop them. Malik stepped closer, the faint scent of cedarwood cologne surrounding her. "It's a lot," he admitted, his gaze steady. "But you're not alone in this. We're partners." His hand brushed her elbow, light as a feather, yet the touch sent a shiver racing through her. She wanted to pull back, to remind herself of the contract, but the sincerity in his tone held her still. The rooftop garden where their wedding was staged glowed under a canopy of fairy lights and white roses. New York's elite filled the seats, business tycoons, politicians, and Malik's distant relatives whose smiles were as polished as their jewelry. To them it was a spectacle, the billionaire bachelor finally taking a bride. To Amara it was theater, a performance with her cast as leading lady in a script she hadn't written. Her stepmother's voice echoed in her mind. "You'll never belong in their world." She gripped her bouquet tighter, thorns biting through the satin ribbon. Malik stood at her side, flawless in his role, his hand resting gently on her lower back as they moved through the crowd. His touch was steady, reassuring, but it ignited a dangerous warmth she couldn't afford. "Smile," he whispered as they greeted a senator she couldn't name. His breath brushed her ear, his fingers tracing a subtle circle on her spine. She forced a smile, her heart pounding. Was this part of the act or something more? The ceremony blurred in her memory, vows exchanged under the stars, her voice firm as she said, "I do," while her mind screamed it wasn't real. Malik's vow was quieter, his eyes locked on hers, and for a heartbeat she wondered if he felt the weight of their lie. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Malik leaned in. His kiss was soft, deliberate, lingering long enough to make her chest tighten. She told herself it was for show, but her body didn't believe it. The reception unfolded under glittering chandeliers, tables heavy with champagne and caviar. Malik led her to the dance floor, his hand firm around hers as violins swelled. "You're doing great," he murmured, his voice low against her temple. She tried to keep her distance, but his closeness disarmed her, his steady hand at her waist making her feel both exposed and safe. "I feel like an imposter," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Like they'll see through me any second." "They see what we want them to see," Malik replied, lips grazing her ear. "A beautiful woman who belongs here." His words were meant to soothe, but they stirred an ache in her chest. Did she belong, or was she just a contract clause dressed in silk? A silver-haired woman approached, her tone sharp. "Malik's aunt. Charming choice, nephew. A cafe girl. How quaint." Amara's spine stiffened, heat flooding her cheeks. Malik's grip on her waist tightened, protective. "She's my wife," he said firmly, his voice low and edged. "That's all you need to know." The aunt's lips pursed before she retreated, leaving Amara shaken. His defense felt real, but could she trust it? Every gesture blurred the line between business and something deeper. Later, as they cut the cake, his hand guided hers, his touch lingering, eyes locking with hers in a way that made the room fall away. For a dangerous moment, it wasn't a contract, it was them. When the music faded, Malik led her to a quiet corner. "You okay?" he asked, his voice softer now, thumb brushing her wrist in a way that felt too intimate for an arrangement. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice cracking. "This is overwhelming. I don't know how to be this person." She gestured at the gown, the glittering crowd, the weight of expectation pressing down. "You don't have to be anyone but yourself," he said, his gaze unwavering. "That's why I chose you." His hand lingered, his warmth pulling her in despite her resolve to resist. The night ended with them slipping into a sleek black car, city lights streaking past as they headed to the airport. Amara stared out the window, heart tangled between fear and desire. She had escaped her stepmother's house, But now she was stepping into another world, one that might break her heart before the year was over. The private jet's hum faded as it landed on a Caribbean airstrip, the night wrapping around them like warm silk. Amara's heart still carried the weight of the wedding, the protective way Malik had stood beside her, his aunt's cold words, the kiss that had blurred the line between contract and something real. She gripped the armrest as the door opened, revealing a sky painted with stars. Malik offered his hand, his brown eyes steady in the dim cabin. "Ready for this?" he asked softly. She nodded, though her pulse betrayed her. 1 year and air freedom. The contract's terms battled with the memory of his touch. She placed her trembling fingers in his and stepped into the humid night. A sleek car whisked them along winding roads until a cliffside resort appeared, its white stone villa glowing under the moonlight. An infinity pool shimmered beside glass doors that opened to a terrace where waves whispered against the rocks below. Amara's breath caught at the overwhelming luxury, the solitude pressing close. No guests, no pretense, just her and Malik, and the unspoken weight of expectation. Inside, Malik set their bags down with calm, deliberate movements. He loosened his tie, the glimpse of collarbone almost intimate. "Long day," he said, his gaze lingering on her face. "There's a guest suite if you want space. No pressure, Amara." His voice was gentle, but the way he spoke her name made her shiver. The offer eased her fear of what the contract demanded, yet stirred a quiet ache. She wanted distance, but his nearness tugged at her. I need that," she whispered, twisting the shawl in her hands. The thought of the contract's clause about an heir pressed hard against her chest. Was tonight supposed to be the night? His restraint suggested otherwise, but uncertainty raced through her. Malik nodded, stepping closer before stopping, as if sensing her tension. "I'll be on the terrace if you want me." His gaze lingered, a silent invitation. Then he turned and walked out, leaving her alone in the vast bedroom with only the rhythm of the waves. She changed into a cotton dress, the heavy gown discarded like a mask. Her reflection in the mirror showed tired eyes shadowed with doubt. She had escaped her stepmother's cage, yet this world of wealth and whispered promises felt like a labyrinth of its own. His touch at the wedding haunted her, lingering and electric. Was it all for show or something more? She thought of the contract, the expectation of intimacy, and her stomach knotted with fear and desire. On the terrace, Malik stood by the railing, his silhouette sharp against the ocean's shimmer. A glass of whiskey sat untouched on the table. He turned when she approached, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, his voice low. "Too much in my head," she admitted, joining him at the railing. The night air carried salt and hibiscus, the sound of waves blending with the heaviness in her chest. "This place is beautiful, but it doesn't feel like my world." He tilted his head, his gaze piercing yet warm. "What's your world, Amara?" His tone was softer than at the wedding, stripped of polish as though he wanted the truth. She traced the railing, her voice quiet. "The cafe. It's small, but it's mine. The smell of coffee, the chatter of people who know my name. It's where I'm not just someone's punching bag." Her throat tightened at the memory of her stepmother's cruelty. "It's not much, but it feels real." Malik exhaled, eyes turning to the sea. "Money and power are cages, too. My father's will, the company, rivals waiting to pounce. It's a constant fight. But that day in the cafe when you stood up for yourself, I saw fire. And that's what I need. Someone real." Her breath hitched, his words igniting something she couldn't douse. "Real for what?" she whispered, the shadow of the contract looming. "I'm here because of a deal, an heir. What happens when I've served my purpose?" He turned back to her, stepping close, his hand hovering near hers. "You're not a means to an end," he said fiercely, though his voice stayed soft. His fingers brushed against hers, a spark rushing through her veins. "This may have started as a deal, but I see you, Amara. I'll wait until you're ready. For everything." Her chest rose and fell rapidly, his nearness overwhelming. His eyes searched hers, his lips a breath away. She leaned forward instinctively, but fear pulled her back. "And if I'm not ready?" she asked, her voice trembling. His hand settled gently over hers, warm and steady. His thumb traced a slow arc across her skin. "Then we wait. Together." His breath brushed her cheek as he leaned close, pausing for her permission. The moment hung heavy, charged with longing, until he pulled back with quiet restraint. "Get some rest," he whispered, his voice thick. "We've got time." Amara nodded, retreating to the guest suite with her throat tight. But in the dark, her body still hummed with the memory of his touch and the softness in his words. His restraint spoke louder than possession. It was a promise. The waves whispered outside the villa as Amara lay awake, Malik's nearness haunting her even in his absence. She replayed his words on the terrace, "I'll wait," words that fought against the fear drilled into her by her stepmother's voice. Just as her eyes grew heavy, a soft knock stirred her. "Amara," Malik's voice carried through the door, low and hesitant. "Can I come in? Just to talk." There was no demand in his tone, only a quiet need, the same vulnerability she had glimpsed beneath the stars. Her pulse quickened, her fingers twisting in the sheets. The contract loomed large in her mind. But his patience, his restraint, his refusal to force her, tugged at something deeper. "Come in," she said softly, her voice steady despite the storm inside. The door opened, and Malik stepped in, framed by the moonlight spilling from the terrace. His tuxedo jacket was gone, replaced by a loose black tee, his hair slightly mussed, his deep brown eyes catching hers with that same unrelenting intensity. He stopped a few steps in, leaving space between them. "I couldn't sleep either," he admitted, his voice a low rumble. "I kept thinking about what you said. About the cafe. About feeling alive there." His hands flexed at his sides as if he were fighting the urge to reach for her. "I want you to feel that with me too." Amara stood slowly, the cool floor grounding her. Her voice trembled as she faced him. "I don't know how. It's a deal. I'm scared that's all I'll ever be. Your contract wife, not myself." Malik stepped closer, his movements careful, his eyes never leaving hers. "You're not just anything," he said fiercely but with tenderness laced through every word. "You're Amara Johnson, the woman who stood up to a man in a cafe without blinking, the woman stronger than she knows. I don't want to take from you. I want to give. Freedom, yes, but more if you'll let me." Her breath hitched, her chest rising and falling rapidly. His words pressed into her walls, breaking through years of doubt. For the first time, she saw him not as the billionaire CEO, not as the man who offered a contract, but as someone who wanted her to be whole. Her hand lifted almost without thought, fingers brushing his arm. His skin was warm, his muscles tensing at her touch. "What if I want more?" she whispered, the confession trembling from her lips. "What if I want this to be real?" Malik's eyes darkened, desire and hope mingling as his hand rose, grazing her cheek. His touch was reverent, almost fragile. "Then we make it real," he murmured, his voice a velvet caress. "But only if you're sure." His thumb traced along her jaw as he leaned closer, his breath mingling with hers. "Can I continue?" he whispered, his words a plea, his eyes searching hers for permission. Amara's heart answered before her mind could, her nod slight but instinctive. "Yes," she breathed. And in that moment a door opened between them. Malik's lips met hers. Not with the staged gentleness of a wedding kiss, but with quiet hunger tempered by care. The kiss deepened slowly. Every movement deliberate, every touch a question she answered with her sighs. His hands found her shoulders, guiding her with patience, his body a steady anchor. She melted into him, her fingers threading through his hair, her pulse racing with trust she hadn't known she could give. He lifted her carefully, laying her back against the bed as the moonlight silvered their skin. His touch was unhurried, reverent, as if she were sacred. Every kiss whispered promises, every caress told her she was seen. His lips moved across her skin, murmuring her name with devotion. "You're enough," he breathed, his voice breaking with emotion. Her walls crumbled under the warmth of his embrace. For the first time, she didn't feel like a contract or a pawn, but a woman cherished. Their connection grew like a quiet storm, passionate yet tender, a weaving of hearts more than bodies. Every pause was a check, his eyes seeking hers, ensuring she wanted this as much as he did. And she did. Fiercely. Fully. The world beyond the villa dissolved, leaving only the rhythm of waves and the heat between them. Their breaths aligned, their bodies answering each other's call until her doubts burned away in the fire they created together. Afterward, they lay tangled in the sheets, the moonlight painting their skin silver. Amara's head rested on his chest, his heartbeat steady under her cheek. She felt raw, exposed but not afraid, not with his arm around her, not with his fingers tracing slow circles across her shoulder. "That wasn't just the contract, was it?" she whispered, her voice trembling with the weight of the moment. Malik tilted her chin, his gaze soft but unwavering. No, he said, his voice a vow. That was us. He kissed her forehead, a gesture so tender it made her ache. And in that fragile moment, for the first time, Amara allowed herself to believe this could be more than a deal. The morning sun spilled through the villa's wide windows, gilding the tangled sheets. Amara stirred slowly, her cheek resting against Malik's chest, his steady heartbeat anchoring her. For a moment she felt safe, whole, wrapped in warmth that made her believe last night had been more than a contract. Malik's fingers traced lazy circles across her shoulder as his deep brown eyes fluttered open, softened by sleep. Morning, he murmured, his voice husky. Her lips curved into a faint smile. Morning. He brushed a knuckle gently along her arm, and for a heartbeat she thought this was what freedom felt like. But then he sat up, reaching for his phone on the nightstand. His expression shifted, composed and businesslike, as his eyes scanned the screen. The tenderness of the night before dimmed, replaced by the face of the man who had built an empire. The shift hit her quietly but sharply, a reminder that the contract still stood between them. You okay? He asked, glancing at her with a warm tone, though his gaze was already drifting back to his phone. Just taking it all in, she said softly, wrapping herself in a robe as she slipped out of bed. Her chest tightened at the sudden distance. Last night had felt like love, but this morning felt like reality creeping back in. They moved to the terrace where breakfast was laid out. Fresh fruit, pastries and rich coffee that reminded her of Harlem brews. Malik poured her a cup, his hand brushing hers, the spark still there, though tangled now with her doubt. She searched his face. Last night? It meant something, didn't it? Malik set down the pot and leaned closer. His eyes softened and his voice dropped to a sincere murmur. It did, more than I expected. But before he could say more, his phone buzzed, pulling his attention back. His jaw tightened as he typed a quick reply. The moment slipped away, leaving Amara's chest aching. Her own phone vibrated in her robe pocket, startling her. She rarely received messages. Curious, she pulled it out, expecting spam. But the text froze her blood. Enjoy your fairy tale, coffee girl. You're just his ticket to the inheritance. He'll be gone in a year. Her breath caught. She looked at Malik, still absorbed in his phone, unaware. The message could have come from anyone. His aunt, a business rival, someone who knew the truth about the contract. But the words cut deep, twisting her stepmother's voice into something sharper. You'll never belong. Everything okay? Malik asked, finally looking up, concern flickering in his eyes. Yeah, she lied quickly, forcing a smile even as her hands trembled. Just a friend checking in. She sipped her coffee, its bitterness mirroring the sting inside her. Malik reached across the table, his hand warm on hers. Amara, I meant what I said. Last night wasn't just the deal. His eyes searched hers as if sensing her hesitation. She wanted to believe him, wanted to hold on to the tenderness she'd felt in his arms, but the buzzing of his phone cut through again. His expression hardened as he rose. Sorry, I need to handle this. Business doesn't stop, not even on a honeymoon. He stepped inside, leaving her on the terrace, the ocean's glitter mocking her fragile hope. Amara pulled out her phone again, rereading the cruel message. The sender's venom stung, but worse was how true it felt. She was a clause in a contract, a temporary wife bought with money and terms. And yet her heart, foolish, unguarded, had already begun to want more. Through the villa's open doors she heard Malik's voice, low and clipped, as he spoke on the phone. Yes, the lawyer needs the paperwork ready. The timeline is clear. The heir secures everything. Amara's breath hitched. The words sliced through her chest. She had known the deal. 1 year, an heir, freedom. But hearing him discuss it so clinically after holding her all night felt like betrayal. She stood frozen, the tenderness of his whispers from hours ago colliding with the cold tone of a man protecting his empire. Her body trembled as she backed into the shadows. The robe clutched tight around her. His words echoed heavy and merciless. The heir secures everything. Was that all she was? A vessel? When he hung up and turned, he found her pale and distant in the doorway. His face softened instantly. Amara, everything okay? She forced a smile, swallowing the storm inside. Just needed water, she lied, retreating to the kitchen. His eyes lingered on her, concern flickering, but he didn't push. She poured a glass with shaking hands, her reflection in the window fractured by the rippling water. Last night had felt like love. This morning felt like a contract reclaiming its power. The day dragged heavy after the phone call, silence stretching between them like an unspoken wall. They walked the resort's private beach, warm sand sliding between their toes, but Amara kept her distance, her words short, her smiles fleeting. Malik tried to draw her out with gentle questions, his hand reaching for hers, but she pulled away, the motion small yet sharp. "Just tired," she said flatly, her eyes fixed on the horizon. His touch, once a spark, now burned with the reminder of the contract. Malik's jaw tightened, but he didn't push. They returned to the villa, and the air between them grew heavier, every wave outside echoing the strain inside. Amara busied herself with a glass of water in the kitchen, her hands trembling. The cruel text replayed in her mind. "You'll be gone in a year," merging with Malik's clipped voice on the phone. She couldn't hold it in any longer. Turning, she found him standing in the doorway, his deep brown eyes shadowed with concern. "Why are you so quiet?" he asked, frustration and worry tangled in his tone. "Talk to me, Amara, what's changed?" Her throat tightened, but the words surged out like a tide she could no longer contain. She slammed the glass onto the counter, her eyes blazing. "Don't pretend this is love," she snapped, her voice trembling with anger and hurt. "I know what I am to you, Malik, an heir. That's it. Then I disappear. I heard you on the phone, talking about timelines, about paperwork. I'm just a piece of the plan, aren't I?" His face paled, jaw clenching as her words struck deep. He stepped closer, voice raw and edged. "Is that what you think? That you're just some tool?" His eyes burned with intensity, his control slipping. "Yes, it started as a contract. I needed a wife and heir, leverage against my family. But do you think I'd risk this much for just anyone?" His voice cracked, hands gesturing wildly as if trying to hold on to her before she slipped away. "You weren't supposed to matter. But you do. You're the only thing that matters now." The confession rang out, raw and unguarded, shattering the tension between them. Amara's breath caught, her walls trembling under the weight of his words. She searched his eyes, expecting calculation, but found only desperation. The empire builder was gone, and in his place stood a man breaking open before her. "Then why?" she whispered, tears threatening her eyes. "Why talk like I'm nothing but a timeline? Why make me feel like a clause instead of a woman?" Malik dragged a hand through his hair, his frustration crumbling into something softer, more desperate. "Because I'm an idiot," he growled low. "The lawyer called about my father's will, about the pressure closing in. I had to answer. I had to play their game. But that's not what you are to me. That's not what this is." He stepped closer, his hands hovering near her arms, not daring to touch. "Last night, every second, it wasn't business. It was you. Your fire, your strength, the way you make me feel alive for the first time in years. Amara, you're not a clause. You're everything." Her heart pounded, torn between the venom of the text, the echo of her stepmother's voice, and the sincerity breaking through in Malik's. She shook her head, tears spilling despite her fight. "I'm scared," she admitted, voice barely audible. "I let myself feel something for you, and now I'm terrified I'm nothing more than a contract." Finally, Malik closed the distance, his hands lifting to cup her face. His thumbs brushed away her tears, his eyes fierce yet tender. "You're not a contract. You're not temporary. You're the woman I love." His forehead pressed to hers, his breath unsteady. "I didn't plan this. I didn't plan to fall for you. But I did. I love you, Amara, not for a year. Not for a deal. For always." Her defenses cracked, the weight of his words tearing down the walls she'd built. In his eyes, she saw no empire, no strategy, only truth. She pressed her hands to his chest, feeling his heart hammering as fast as hers. "I want to believe you," she whispered. "But I'm so afraid of being hurt." "Then let me prove it," he murmured, kissing her temple with reverence. "No more secrets. No more distance. Just us." His voice broke with vulnerability she had never imagined in him. "Will you let me try?" Amara's tears flowed freely, but they weren't only from pain anymore. They were release. She leaned into him, wrapping her arms around his waist, letting his warmth steady her. For the first time, the fear loosened its grip. Amara's tears still clung to her lashes as she looked up at Malik, his forehead pressed to hers, his breath unsteady. His words echoed inside her. "I love you, not for a year, not for a deal, for always." She searched his eyes, and for the first time she saw no walls, no business armor, just a man stripped bare. The billionaire who had bargained for her was gone. The man standing in front of her was Malik, vulnerable and real. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "I see you too, Malik, and I love you." The admission broke something in him. Relief and longing flooded his features, his eyes darkening as if her words set him free. He cupped her face with trembling hands, pulling her into a kiss that was no longer bound by contracts or hesitation. It began soft, rediscovering, then deepened with hunger, pouring every fear, every hope into the heat between them. Amara clutched at his shirt, fingers tangled in the fabric as he lifted her effortlessly into his arms, carrying her toward the bedroom with the ocean's rhythm pulsing through the open windows. Moonlight bathed them as he laid her down, his hands reverent as they slipped the robe from her shoulders. Each touch was deliberate, not claiming but cherishing, not rushing but savoring. "Amara," he whispered, his voice thick with devotion, his lips brushing along her collarbone. "I don't want this to end." His words trembled with need but also with promise. She arched into him, her voice a breathless vow. "Then don't let it." What followed was no longer the spark of their first night, but a fire fed by truth and forgiveness. Malik's kisses trailed across her skin like declarations, his touch fierce yet tender, every caress a vow that she was not a clause, not a pawn, but a woman loved beyond measure. Their bodies moved in rhythm, passion, and devotion colliding, each breath, each sigh weaving them closer together. "Can I continue?" he whispered again, his voice breaking with more than desire, his eyes searching hers for consent, not just for the night, but for forever. "Always," she breathed, her hands pulling him closer, sealing the promise with her body and her heart. The world outside disappeared. The rivals, the contract, the venomous voices from her past. In the villa, beneath the silver moonlight, only truth remained. Malik whispered her name like a prayer, each word binding him tighter to her, and she gave herself back to him, not out of obligation but out of choice. Afterward, they lay entwined, the ocean's song lulling them into stillness. Malik's fingers traced slow patterns on her back, his breath warm against her temple. "I don't want just a year," he said, his voice low and raw. "I want you forever, Amara, no contract, no terms, just us." She lifted her head, hazel eyes meeting his steady brown gaze. Her lips curved into a soft smile, breaking through the last of her fears. "Forever," she echoed, her voice steady now, her heart full. In his arms, she no longer felt like a waitress escaping a cage. She felt like a woman loved, whole and free. Their days in the Caribbean blurred into sunlight and starlight, into touches that no longer carried the shadow of a contract, but the warmth of choice. Yet even in the haze of closeness, the reality of Malik's world waited for them in New York. When the jet finally carried them back, the city's pulse felt harsher, louder, a jarring reminder of everything they had left behind. In Malik's penthouse, sleek and gleaming above the skyline, a stack of unopened mail waited on the counter. Amara's eyes caught a thick, embossed envelope, its weight instantly familiar. The contract. Her stomach twisted, the memory of every clause flooding back, 1 year, an heir, freedom. She froze, staring at the paper that had chained them together. Malik noticed. His gaze followed hers, then lingered on the envelope. Slowly he picked it up, his thumb brushing the edges as if it no longer belonged in his hands. He looked at her, his deep brown eyes raw, stripped of their usual calm. "This doesn't belong here anymore." He opened the envelope, pulling out the crisp pages filled with terms that had once defined them. "I thought I needed this," he said, his voice low but steady. "An heir, a wife on paper, leverage to keep my father's empire. But I was wrong." He looked at her with complete certainty. "I don't need an heir to keep you. I just need you." Amara's breath caught, tears threatening as her heart raced. "Malik." Without hesitation, he tore the contract in half. Then again. The sharp sound filled the silence, and the pieces fluttered to the floor like broken chains. Her chest felt lighter, freer, her fears loosening with every shred. He stepped closer, holding her face in his hands. "I love you. Not for a year. Not for an empire. For always. Will you stay with me? Not as my contract wife, but as my partner, my everything." Tears spilled freely as she nodded, her lips trembling into a smile. "Yes. Always." She leaned into him, their kiss sealing a vow stronger than any paper. "Then continue," she whispered against his mouth, her voice steady now, no longer bound by fear. "For the rest of our lives." His arms tightened around her, pulling her closer as if he would never let go. But the world wasn't done testing them. That afternoon, Amara's phone buzzed with a voicemail. Her stepmother's voice slithered through the speaker, dripping with venom. "You think you've won, girl? You're nothing in his world. He'll tire of you. You'll see." Amara's chest clenched at the familiar cruelty. But before the words could sink their claws into her, Malik's hand closed over hers. He had heard it too, his eyes blazing with protectiveness. "She's wrong," he said firmly, his voice leaving no space for doubt. "You're my world." Her eyes filled again, but this time with something fierce and unbreakable. She deleted the message without hesitation. Her stepmother's poison had no power here. Later that week, Malik suggested a walk through the city. The crisp autumn air bit at their cheeks as they moved hand in hand through the bustling streets. For the first time, Amara didn't feel like a stranger in his world. His grip was steady, grounding, his presence telling everyone around them she belonged. He stopped at a familiar corner, guiding her toward the glowing sign of Harlem Brews Cafe. Amara froze, breath catching as memories swelled, the grinder's roar, mismatched tables. The first time Malik had watched her from the corner booth, the place that had been her cage and her refuge. Inside, the cafe hummed as always, the smell of coffee wrapping around her. Malik guided her to the counter where she had once poured his drink, where it had all begun. His eyes softened as he spoke low, just for her. "This is where I knew you were different. Standing your ground. Fierce and real. I was searching for something true and I found you." Amara laughed through her tears, her heart swelling. "I thought you were just another customer with bad coffee taste." His grin broke through, boyish and unguarded. "Not bad taste. Just searching for you." He pulled her into a kiss right there at the counter, the cafe's chatter fading into the background. They sat in the same corner booth where he had once watched her with quiet intensity, only now their hands were entwined, their love no longer hidden behind contracts or conditions. "We'll build it here," Malik said, his voice firm, his eyes locked on hers. "Our life, our way. No contracts, no cages. Just us. Forever," Amara whispered, her heart full, her soul steady. And for the first time in her life, she believed it. The weeks after their return unfolded like a new rhythm, one no contract could dictate. Amara woke each morning in Malik's arms, no longer weighed down by doubts but lifted by the certainty in his gaze. The penthouse that once felt like his fortress now felt like their home, filled with laughter, warmth, and the quiet rituals of two people building a life together. Malik changed too. The sharp edges that had defined the ruthless CEO softened around her. His smiles came easier, his laughter unguarded, his voice gentler when he said her name. He no longer carried his empire alone. He carried it with her by his side, not as a pawn or clause, but as his partner. One evening, as autumn bled into winter, Malik led her to the rooftop garden of the building, strings of soft lights glowing against the city skyline. The same place where they had stood as strangers saying vows for a contract now held them as lovers bound by choice. Amara's curls danced in the breeze, her coat wrapped tightly around her as she looked at the man who had once terrified her with promises tied to paper. Malik slipped his hands into hers, pulling her close. "We started this the wrong way," he said, his deep voice carrying across the night air. "But I don't want our story to be remembered for a deal. I want it to be remembered for love. For us." Her throat tightened, tears rising as she whispered, "Malik, it already is." He reached into his pocket, not for a contract, not for an agreement, but for a small velvet box. Opening it, he revealed a simple diamond ring, elegant and timeless. No terms, no timelines, just forever. "Amara Johnson, will you stay with me? Not because of a deal, not because of money, but because you choose me the way I choose you." Her heart overflowed as tears slipped down her cheeks. "Yes," she breathed, her voice breaking with joy. 1,000 times yes. He slid the ring onto her finger, sealing the promise with a kiss that held no fear, only devotion. The city lights blurred around them as his arms wrapped tight around her, his lips moving against hers with the certainty of forever. From that night on, they faced the world hand in hand. Malik's rivals, his family, her stepmother, none of them could break the fire they had built together. What began as a contract had transformed into a truth stronger than any paper. A love forged in defiance, in trust, and in the courage to believe in each other. And whenever doubt threatened, Malik would take her hand, look into her eyes, and whisper the same words that had first carried them from uncertainty into forever. "Can I continue?" And every time Amara's answer was steady, certain, and filled with love. Always.